Okay, so this episode, this was a matter of trust in my creators. Brad and Ryan, I trust you with my viewing. So that's what actually got me through this one. Hey guys, thanks so much for clicking on the video. This is my review for American Horror Stories. This is episode 3 of season 2. And as I was saying, my trust in Brad and Ryan Murphy is what actually got me through this one. I'm not real big on the serial killer thing or the urban legends thing. I'm not, listen, horror is like a really big genre, and there's just certain things that I just don't really get down with. I don't like zombies. I don't like serial killers. That just kind of, and I don't like the woods. So, when those things get to happening, I'm like, But anyway, so I knew here that right away I'm dealing with serial killers and urban legend. But I said, okay, James, just chill out. Chill out. Get down off your soapbox. Let them tell the story. You trust Brad and Ryan. You know they're going to do something with the story. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. So let me tell you what went down. So we meet Marcy and her girlfriend Piper. They're just two hot young chicks, and they're having their way at the bar, and they're down at the club, and they just getting their club on. And they're kind of, doing the whole girl power thing and all of this. Well, Marcy gets some eyes across the bar. She sees Wyatt. Wyatt's good looking little fella. Okay, so you got Wyatt, and we ain't got to go through no whole long thing. They end up dancing. The dancing is very provocative. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, okay, do people do this still? I mean, it was really, he was rubbing her down, and they end up kissing on the dance floor. I'm like, you don't know him. But okay, girl, whatever. So it got real steamy on the dance floor. Next thing you know, baby, she's busted him down and busted it open in the car. Now, they're in her car. They're in the back seat. And he was totally satisfied, whereas she, not so much. Not so much. And then she basically denied it because he was really arrogant. He's like, so this is the part where you asked me for my number, and then, you start calling me and wanting more out of me than what this is probably going to be. And she's like, no, not really. This is the part where I asked you to get out of my car. Get out of my car. This is the part. That's that part. And he's looking at her, and I said, oh, baby, his little feelings was hurt, honey. I said, oh, wow, wow, wow. So that was that. She denied him, sent him on. So then on her way home, she's on her way home, and there's this red Jeep, and he's tailing her, and before long he starts ramming the back of her. We know this. We know how this whole thing goes. And she gave him the slip. She took off. She takes off. She goes and she pulls off of the road. She goes into his car wash and she loses him. And then she goes on, makes her way on home. House is fabulous. Fabulous house. But this house, I'm like, it's gorgeous. I would have never bought it. It's too much glass. Like everything is glass, and these whole full windows from top to bottom, and just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous house. But anyway, she gets there, and this is where we meet Chaz. Chaz is actually her husband. They have an open marriage. In a very fast time, we found out a lot about them. They have this open marriage. He's like, I'm worried about you, and he says, on the news that you keep hearing people talking about people disappearing from clubs and this, that, thing, and the other, and people are having these disappearances with these nightclubs, and they're thinking that it might be a serial killer, this, that, thing, and the other. And he even offers, she says, I just, I gotta do this. Again, it's this open relationship that she has. She said, you know, I just want to have fun and this, that, thing, and the other. He's like, well, he offered to go out with her. She's like, what do you mean? Like, what is that going to look like? He's like, I worry about you and I just want to make sure that you're okay, you know? So that's that, all of that. And then she's taking her makeup off. And then we see she has heavy makeup because over here she has this really, which I guess it's probably like a birthmark, but it's like purplish and it's really covering a large space on her face. And he's like, you know, I think you're beautiful. I don't know why you always cover that up. I don't think you need to cover it up. And I'm like, okay, wow. So you see, he's really in love with her, and she's pretty much got herself into an arrangement situation, and she's just kind of like, you know, you just ain't enough, or you just ain't, or maybe she's outgrown him, or something. But he's definitely, the relationship is like this. He's definitely totally in love with her. She's kind of like, oh, God, you are trailing on the hem of my garment, okay? So about 3:30 in the morning, you're hearing this bang, 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 bang. And she like gets up and she's walking through, first of all, she's walking through the house. Honey, it's your house. So I thought that was very strange. She's walking through the house with a flashlight. Turn the damn lights on. But she goes all the way down to the bottom floors, like 3 floors down, into like this wine cellar or whatever. She goes down there, it's in the basement, and there's actually one of the windows is actually open. She looks behind her, here's Chaz. Chaz walked like a cat, child. He done came down behind her. She's like, everything's fine. She never said anything to him about the window being open. I was like, that was weird. So, but again, I guess she just didn't want him to start fussing again. So they go on back up. Then we actually see Marcy talking with Piper the next day, and they're talking, and she's saying, you know, she said, I don't know, you know, you and kind of like you leaving the bar with guys, like we got to be careful and stuff like that, and all of that. And then she says, you know, let me tell you, you know, the story about this urban legend girl. She's like, you know, because it's the urban legend of how a woman gets in the car. There was a man, and she's telling the story, it's a specific woman, but the man got in the back seat of her car. She didn't know as she's driving, because she had told her the story of what had happened to her. She's driving, and the person behind her was actually doing all of this, peeping and all of this stuff. And what ended up happening was the person was actually just trying to get her attention. The person wasn't actually trailing her. The person was trying to get her attention because there was somebody in the back seat of her car. And when she pulled off the road and got away from the person who was in the back seat of the car, the person who was in the back seat of the car took her, jammed her in her neck, cut her head off, and stuck her head onto the front of her car. When they found her, so her head was stuck on the front of the car. You know, you got a nice little gory scene, and I was like, okay, here we go. So I'm hanging on at this point, like, ugh, here we go. Serial killers and god doggone urban legends. So she's like, okay, so you got to promise me no more guys from the club, you leaving me, and then you're in a car, you know, getting down with them in your car. No more of that, you know. And she was really, Piper was really stamping it to her, you know. She's like, okay, of course she's getting a little irritated, but she's like, okay. Next thing we see them out again, honey. This time she's over there. She's having it with a girl, honey. She got a woman out there in the car. So Piper actually comes up to the window, and she's like pissed. And she's like, really? Really? And she said, well, you said no guys, so it's a girl. Listen, I just do what I want. So they start having this little argument, and then she tells her, and I think it was really too bad, but they had this argument, and she's telling her, what are you, a nymphomaniac or something? Something's wrong. Like, why can't you just get situated? Like, I mean, come on. Like, this is ridiculous. And then she ends up telling her, she says, you know, I don't know, is it that you're really worried about me, or is it that you are jealous? So Piper's like, you know what, you, honey. And Piper stops on Piper sharp. She leaves her there at the club. She goes back in the club, and she's in the club for a while, and she's kind of like looking around, you know, trying to see what's going on. Meanwhile, fingers is still sticky from her little business out there in the car. And I said, girl, you could have went on home. Hadn't you gotten your your vroom vroom for the day, honey? But I guess not. Anyway, so she's sitting out there. She look over, baby, there's Chaz. Chaz done followed her to the club. So then she goes over, she says, "So you following me?" And then the two of them get into a little tiff. And she tells him, either you can leave or I'm going to leave. But this ain't working. So he just defeated that little thing. And he's cute too. He takes off. He leaves. So she's getting ready to leave. She's out here. And she's getting ready to leave. And she happens to see the red Jeep in the parking lot. She's like, oh my God. So she's looking, and she couldn't, before she could get her phone out and you know, get a flash on the license plate, she ends up, the person is actually coming out of the club with another person. And so they're over there, it's the guy and a girl, and they're like kind of making out on the side of the car. She goes and gets in her car. They're not paying her any attention. And he ends up saying whatever he's going to say to the girl. The girl goes about her business. He goes ahead and gets in his car. He's kind of high, you know, a little feeling it. He goes, now she's following him. She's following him. And she takes his license plate. She goes on home. Next day, she's keyboard gangster. And honey, she's looking it up, trying to figure out what she could figure out. Finds out that the guy's name is Paul. Finds out where his job is. And all of this, she's searching his social media and all, doxing him, getting all his information. Chaz comes and he tells her, this is not working out. Maybe I'll just move out. I can't do this anymore. And she's kind of like, it's going over her head and under her feet. She's like, whatever, Chaz. So he goes on. And that's that. So she goes ahead on. She goes to Paul's job. They had this really weird exchange about a knife set, because they sell culinary equipment. Have this really weird exchange about this knife set, and he comes across he's telling her about, the butcher knife of the set should feel like an extension of your arm and all of this, and I'm like, and she's kind of looking like she's getting a little creeped out, because again, she knows that he was following her a couple nights back and everything. And so he's like, okay, well, if he's like flirting, and she says, you know what, that's okay. And he's like, she said, I don't really cook that much, so I'm not gonna need those. He says, well, this is not a good knife to get rid of your boyfriend, I'm like, that's weird. And so she's like, okay, I don't have a boyfriend, I have a husband. All right, I'm out of here. He's like, oh, well, if you got more questions and you change your mind, you want to talk, I'll get off at 7, whatever. 7 o'clock ends up coming, baby. She ends up hanging around. She follows this boy to his house. I said, oh my God. Gets out, she's walking around. He's getting in the shower. He gets all undressed, gets in the shower. She literally lets herself into his house. And she's snooping around. She ends up picking up a knife. He did have a little that little hooked little paring knife and all that. She gets that little knife and she's walking around. And next thing you know, he just snuck up on her. Now they're having this confrontation. He got this bat or this stick or something. And she's like, put it down or I'm telling you, I'm going to do you with this knife. And they're going back and forth and they're like talking. And they both got their weapons drawn. And it ends up, he tells her, he's like, no. He's like, he's like, oh my God, that was you? And he's like, okay. He says, yeah, it was so weird. He said, I was actually trying to warn you. There was someone in the back of your car. She's like, well, we know that's not true because I'm still here. I'm still alive, dummy. And he's like, no, there was somebody in the back of your car. I was trying to warn you. And he said, and then once you broke in here, I thought maybe it was the killer that actually, was the killer and then did away with you because I lost you and trying to track you down. I lost you and all that. He said, I thought they had then got you, baby, was coming to get me. So they get all that out of the way. They put their little stuff down. And then she goes, and then she's like, well, I mean, being as though, like, we're kind of like friends now, and you were so nice to be looking out for me. And so she goes and she starts trying to seduce him. And she's like, yeah, we could, get together and do this, that. And she's getting all up in there. Hey, she got him all hot. Next thing you know, she just took a nice little needle up out of her bag, honey, or her pocket, and in the neck, honey. And he falls down to the floor. And, he's like, oh, what is that? And then he turns around and grabs her by her neck, and he's choking her out. Honey, they had a little tussle. He get her down on the ground. He's literally choking her out. He's like, "I'll kill you, bitch." And so it's a whole, a whole mess. And then next, somebody comes behind him with the stick and bam, knocks him out. He falls out to the ground. Look up. Who is it? It's Chaz. Chaz to the rescue. She's like, "What are you doing here?" Chaz is like, "I followed you. I was worried about you, and I followed you." And he's like, "My goodness." He's going to say, "Listen, you have to stop using this stuff. This stuff is not good. You need something stronger. This takes too long." And he's holding up the needle. And I said, "What?" And I said, "See, here's where my trust in Ryan Murphy and Brad actually comes into play." I said, "Okay, so what's the twist? Where are we at now?" So go back to their house. Here, they're talking, and Brad's just like, I could be out. I could move into that apartment as early as tomorrow. She's like, "Okay, Chaz, whatever." And he says, "Well, go ahead out. Go ahead and you want to lay down or something?" She said, "No, I'm not gonna lay down. I feel better when I'm working." And he said, "Okay." He said, "Well, just let me know, and then I'll come down and I'll clean that." So she goes downstairs to the wine cellar. Boom, boom, boom. There's a trap door there. She goes in through the trap door, and there he is. Paul is sitting there. He's got a ball gag in his mouth. He's handcuffed to a chair. He has nothing on but his underwear. And then, like every other serial killer, she starts explaining herself. And she tells him, "Yes, you were right. There was someone in my car. It was actually Wyatt." And what had happened was she told Wyatt to get out of her car. We get a flashback. Wyatt goes to get out of the car. She jugs him in the neck. And, of course, the serum didn't work on him as fast. And that's why he saw him sit up in the car. And she's like, "If you don't put your head down, I'm going to kill you right here in this car." He was like groggy, but it hadn't knocked him all the way out. So he was completely correct. She says, "But see, I'm working. I'm doing a service. Not just a serial killer." She had all of this stuff, all this weird stuff she was getting ready to use to torture and kill. She said, "But I'm doing a service. See, I'm ridding the world of all the entitled assholes, such as yourself. People who have made it very hard for me." And then she starts telling the story of how angry she is and was going through life as a teenager with that mark. She had the mark on her. She's like, "It's assholes like you that made it so hard for me." Child, and she goes to torture. And baby, she takes this, it's sort of like like knuckles, like the knuckle thing, but it had spikes. And she juked him in the leg. I said, "Oh, girl, she's too much, honey." I said, "Girl, you need to be working for the special services, honey. Torturing people and carrying on." Juked him in the leg. Then she cut off his fingers, like 3 or 4 of his fingers. And he's like having a fit, got this ball gag. And then she gets this long machete, honey, and she's talking to him. And she's like, "Yeah." So she was going to take his head. She said, you really almost got me into trouble because you calling the police and following me and carrying on. She said, "Yeah, to take you out." And so she's sitting there, and then she gets the knife by his neck. I thought she was going to slit his throat. And then she says, "You know what? This is all wrong. I'm doing this all wrong. I don't want to do this like this anymore." And she's like, "You know what? You hold your seat. Don't go anywhere." And then she just took the knife and just, right here. And the knife just stuck in his head. And she just walked away. I said, "Oh, tore him up. Just so nonchalant. I said, "Oh my God." So she goes upstairs and she says to Chaz, he's saying something about, she's covered in blood. He's like, "Oh, okay, that was fast. Well, I'm going to go clean up this, that, and the other." She going to say, "You know what, Chaz? I want to start over. I just want to start over. I just don't want to do this like this anymore. I just want to start this all over again. And, you're like, you're the perfect partner and all of this thing." And like she just had a whole reset on all of this stuff. And she says, "This is what I want to do. I want you to be with me. I want you to be with me. I want you to be more than just killing, just cleaning up and then putting the bodies, burying the bodies. I want you to be more with me. And again, I told you he loves her child. So he's like, oh, okay. She said, I know the perfect person to start with. And so we see the two of them go downstairs, honey. And who's in the chair with a ball gag, honey? Piper. And they're both there. She got a machete, and old Chaz got some old apparatus. He get ready to get her, and they get Miss Piper, honey. And that's where it ended. Hey, they choked her, and I said, oh Lord. So again, I don't generally like these types of stories, but the twist definitely helped me get through it. Hey, it is what it is. American Horror Stories. This was episode 3 of season 2. It's cool. It's cool. Just not my favorite part of the horror genre, but the storytelling and the twist and the keeping me engaged, always spectacular. Always spectacular. They are the only one. Ryan Murphy does literally get me to sit through. Like, I sat through American Horror Story 1984 knowing I hate that whole Friday the 13th feel. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. But I sat through the whole season. That dark brand of humor that he has has got me through. Zombies. I can't stand zombies. And there was an amazing story that kind of had that whole apocalypse feel to it in the season 1 of American Horror Stories. So yeah, you know, we just make it do what it do. And listen, when it comes to Ryan Murphy, hey, when you're good, you're good. And I'm hooked. So it is what it is. I'll catch you guys next week for season 2, episode 4. Later, guys.